Lord, let not the wife depart from her husband. But, and if she does depart, let her remain unmarried, or be reconciled to her husband. And let not the husband put away his wife. But to the rest speak I, not the Lord. If any brother has a wife that believes not, and she is pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. And the woman that has a husband that believes not, and if he is pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else your children would be unclean, but now they are holy. But if the unbelieving departs, let him depart. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God has called us to peace. For what knowest thou, O wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how knowest thou, O man, whether you will save thy wife?
All right, so a lot to consider there. So does this condone divorce? Might be a question. What do you think? No, this doesn't condone divorce. Jesus' law, Matthew 19, is still in effect. So remain married. If separation comes, remain unmarried or be reconciled. Simply stated. So there may come a time when the person that doesn't believe decides it's time for him to move on. If the believer has done everything that they can do to keep the marriage together, they've lived as Christ would want them to live. They've shown their light as much as they can show it. And then the believer says, no, I'm not doing this anymore. Time for me to go. And Paul says, let them go. They go. So, if there comes a time that they can reconcile, then Paul tells them to reconcile. Now, this person is left, but it places, a bit of a hardship in that neither one of them can remarry without sinning. And so, Jesus' law is still in effect, except for fornication. So, is divorce permitted for Christians? No. The exception is fornication. The law Jesus instituted in Matthew 19 still remains. Now, there might have been a question on verse 14 about the children. And all that I could find and be comfortable with was from the old law that there were situations where men would marry women who had worshipped idols, foreign women, women from other countries, and then they were told to send them back with the children. And so the wife and the children were considered unclean. So what Paul, I think, is saying here, that is no longer in effect, and that there is some sanctification taking place by the believer standing strong in her position, or his position, whatever the case may be. I'm just looking at through his wife there. But and so, seeing that, then there is some hope that the children would come to obey the gospel, and seeing that light. So I think what he's telling here is the believer to stand strong and be fervent and be the believer that God has called you to believe. Okay, looking at 17 through 24, one can serve God, whether Jew or Gentile, whether slave or free. whether married or single. So, Josh, you did a real good job reading, but I'm going to let Brother Wes here. I know he's got a different translation, right? What are you reading from? New American Standard. Okay, 17 through 24.
Only as the Lord has assigned to each one, as God has called each, in this manner let him walk. And so I direct in all the churches. Was any man called when he was already circumcised? He is not to become uncircumcised. Has anyone been called in uncircumcision? He is not to be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. But what matters is the keeping of the commandments of God. Each man must remain in that condition in which he is called. Were you called while a slave? Do not worry about it, but if you are able also to become free, rather do that. For he who was called in the Lord while a slave is the Lord's freedman. Likewise, he who is called while free is Christ's slave. You were bought with a price. Do not become slaves of men. Brethren, each one is to remain with God in that condition in which he was called.
All right, so stay in the place that you are. If you're free, you're a slave to God. If you're a slave, you're free because of Jesus Christ. And so either way, you win. And so he says that to the Jew and to the Gentile. You can't undo what's already been done. You still got to hold to the contracts that's been made prior to, or the obligations that you've made. Certainly you're taken out of your sin. But whether you're in any of these situations, Jew, Gentile, slave, or free, married, or single, Jew and Gentile refers to the circumcision and the uncircumcised. Question, does becoming a Christian free one from obligations already binding? In other words, they're in a situation that they're placed there. They're there. If I'm a slave, do I become free if I become a Christian? If I'm free, do I become a slave if I become a Christian? No. And we can't undo being a Jew or a Gentile, being married or single. So the answer is no. However, obedience to Christ will free one of his sins. And so any situation we find ourselves in, any obligation that we have, and that we're called to the gospel calls us, and we respond in a positive way, we remain where we are, but we have salvation in Jesus Christ. All right? And then 7:25 through 39. Times of distress are upon you. So, let's. I'll take this one up here and really confuse Bill. What version are you reading from? New King James, verses 25 through 39.
Now concerning virgins, I have no commandment from the Lord, yet I give judgment as one whom the Lord in his mercy has made trustworthy. I suppose, therefore, that this is good because of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be loosed. Are you loosed from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But even if you do marry, you have not sinned, and if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Nevertheless, such will have trouble in the flesh, but I would spare you. 30?
39.
Okay, thanks. But this I say, brethren, the time is short. so that from now on, even those who have wives should be as though they had none. Those who weep as though they did not weep. Those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice. Those who buy as though they did not possess. And those who use this world as not misusing it. For the form of this world is passing away. But I want you to be without care. He who is unmarried cares for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. There is a difference between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cares about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. But she who is married cares about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And this I say for your own profit, that not that I may put a leash on you, but for what is proper, and that you may serve the Lord without distraction. But if any man thinks he is behaving improperly toward his virgin, if she is past the flower of youth, and thus it must be, let him do what he wishes. He does not sin. Let them marry. Nevertheless, he who stands steadfast in his heart, having no necessity, but has power over his own will, and has so determined in his heart that he will keep his virgin, does well. So then, he who gives her in marriage does well, but he who does not give her in marriage does better. A wife is bound by law as long as her husband lives. But if her husband dies, she is at liberty to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. But she is happier if she remains as she is, according to my judgment, and I think I also have the Spirit of God.
All right. So, Paul in one part there says he's going to give a judgment. But, do you trust Paul? Do you know Paul as an apostle of Jesus Christ? Do you know Paul as a man who's been commissioned by Jesus Christ for a purpose? And that purpose is to preach the gospel. And do you know Paul as an inspired writer of God? And I think we can say yes to all those. And so Paul is trying to make them understand or rebuild their focus on Jesus Christ rather than the things of the world. And he's saying all this simply to say, you need to take care of that. You're concerned about those possessions. You're concerned about those things that all of us are concerned about. You're distracted. In your present distress, you're having a difficult time. And these were the questions that they had written to them. Verse 35 in my version says, to promote what is seemingly and to secure undistracted devotion to the Lord. So, he was trying to equip them to better serve the Lord, along with answering some pretty serious questions here about marriage and about things that they were having to deal with in that life, about idols, paganism, and then again Judaism and Gentiles. So, do not change your marriage status. If you're married, stay married. If you're unmarried, at this time, because of present distress, it's better if you stay unmarried. But again, he doesn't, absolutely say you cannot marry. He still gives them an opening there. Do what he wishes. He does not sin. Let her marry. And I know that's talking about the virgin, but it's also in reference to adults. If you can remain unmarried, it frees you from the cares of the world. So what he says here is what we already know, that the man who is married is concerned about things of the world and things that will please his wife. And so that's his concern. And Paul is saying, if you're in my situation where I don't have a spouse, I don't have those worries. I don't have those things to worry about. And so as they were getting married, and if they were to have children, then they had to be concerned about those children being persecuted in the upcoming days. And I think Paul knew this, and that's why his judgment was this. His opinion, as my version says, was this, that they remain unmarried. But he was not preventing them to marry. But you do not sin if you marry. And a father does not sin if he allows his daughter to marry. And the married is bound so long as the partner lives. And so sometimes there comes a question about in the Lord, that reference. And obviously, we would want to marry someone in the Lord. But let's take this back to Corinth in that day. I've got the choice to marry someone that's a member at the church at Corinth, or I could marry this pagan over here that might be on the fence. I think I see him tilting this way a little bit, or her, whatever the case may be. Still, Paul says, as long as they marry in the Lord. So the choice would need to be this person who's in the church at Corinth, or the church at Ephesus, or wherever. And so that's why I believe that Paul gives that directive, is that they marry in the Lord. And obviously this would need to be a Christian that is eligible for marriage, one that had not been in a previous marriage, and in those situations that we talked about earlier in the chapter. So, as we think about that, then we want to carry that over into Hanceville present day. But what I'm saying was that we don't have a situation like they had in Corinth. Now, I think it's still good advice that we marry in the Lord. But, again, I haven't seen a pagan lately. And to be as much of an immoral thinker as they would have been would have been unlike anything we've talked to or seen. And so these people were in the midst of immorality. All right, I think that concludes my presentation. Now, we have just a short time for a question, one comment. No, if you have a question or a comment, Brother Aaron. Yeah. Inspired wisdom. And they had a lot to distract them. You know, we talk about our culture and our society and how many things there are out there that distract us. I don't know if it compares to that situation. I don't know that we get up every day and we fear for our life, or we fear for the life of our children. Human trafficking is probably the closest thing that we can think of, but it's still not as prevalent as it would have been in Corinth as far as what they were seeing and what could possibly happen and how easily they could be distracted. It would be much easier just to give yourself to the temple and go ahead and involve yourself in that. You probably wouldn't have that distress or that stress. You could go about and live your life the way you wanted to live as long as you went by what they directed you and how they directed you. Might include sacrificing your children. But you'd have to be okay with that. So, it's a different type of distraction, I would say, from what we see in this day and what we see in Corinth today. All right, anyone else? I know you haven't had these questions long, but I think as a way of review, I'll go ahead. I don't have mine answered either. So, you want to give it a try? How much time would you have left? 5 minutes? Is that 4 minutes? Is that what you're telling me? Okay. Bill, you had the last one, didn't you? Okay, and then we're moving on or moving on with. Yes, they most certainly had. That was the easy one. All right, number 2. Moving on back.
What was his initial answer to their question concerning marriage? His initial answer was that it's good for a man not to touch a woman.
All right. So, yes to that. That was his initial answer, and we talked about touch probably meaning more than just touching someone, and it would make reference to a physical relationship. All right, number 3.
Does verse 2 indicate that most people will in fact marry? Yes.
Okay. Number 4.
Is the husband-wife sexual relationship dealt with in a forthright way?
Yes, I would say so. Number 5. Okay. So, it's no. All right, number 6. Okay. Number 7.
Paul said it was better to marry than to divorce.
Okay. Burn with passion or desire, some versions say. All right, number 8. All right. Number 9. No, is right. All right, number 10. All right. Number 11. If the unbeliever departs, was the believer under bondage to him. I'm going to have to look at that one. Is not under bondage, yes. That's correct.
What had Paul ordained in all the churches? I'll just have to read this, but God has distributed everything as the Lord has called everyone so that we walk, so ordained I am in all the churches.
I don't know if that's making reference to elders or what he's got in mind there. Let me take a look back at Acts 16. And 4. Well, Acts 16:4 says, "Now while they were passing through the cities, they were delivering the decrees which had been decided upon by the apostles and elders who were in Jerusalem for them to observe." So I would say decrees or directives that they were had delivered to all the churches. All right, number 13. Any takers back there? We're out of time? Is that a yes? Okay, we're out of time. Mark Isbell had the last question, number 13. No, number 12. Thank you for your kind attention.
And he told him a parable, saying, The land of a rich man was very productive. And he began reasoning to himself, saying, What shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops? Then he said, this is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for you, many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you. And now who will own that? Who will own what you have prepared? So is the man who stores up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God. So we're told in this parable of a rich man who, upon seeing that he has a plentiful harvest, his land was very productive, it says, that he reasons within himself that I'm going to tear down my barns, I'm going to build bigger barns and store up my grain, have enough goods for many years to come. So his mindset was such that I'm done working, right? I'm done. I've got enough up that I can kind of take my ease, as he says. And that's usually where we focus when we study this parable is, talking about sort of resting on our achievements. And while that's a good focus and that's a good study, I don't want to talk about that specifically tonight. Instead, I want to look at verse 20, where he says, but God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you, and now who will own what you have prepared? The wording here is sort of rough, right? He is called a fool. Anytime anybody starts a sentence with me by saying "you fool," I tend to listen. May start a fight, I don't know, but that's an attention getter. You fool. And then he basically says, you're going to die tonight. You're not going to have another day on this earth. All this work you've done, all these great things you've done, this storing up treasures on earth for yourself, so you can just take it easy, coast into whatever remaining life you have, you're not going to get to enjoy it. It's going to be gone. And the principle here is that we don't know when our lives are going to end. We have no idea what tomorrow holds for us. In James chapter 4, in verse 13, says, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell and make profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. So, same principle, right? Just not in this parable type form. We have the parable that says, I've got all these things, I've done all these great things for myself, and I've stored it all up, and I can just coast through the rest of my life. And God says, you fool. And then the same principle, looked at a different way. Today, tomorrow, we'll go to such and such a city, we'll spend some time there, spend a year there, we'll buy and sell, we'll have a good time. We'll do all the things we want to do. And God's response there is, you do not know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? It is even a vapor. And so, with this weather changes we've been having, you're out as the sun starts coming up and you see this fog in the air. And when I go to work early, so I'm, pre-dawn hours driving to work, and it's just thick, heavy fog. And then 15, 20 minutes after the sun comes up, what happens? It's gone, right? It's clear. You can see for miles. And that's how our life is. Our life is like that vapor. It can be, it's here, it's thick, it's you all see each other, and then you're gone. And that's sort of a heavy topic, right? To think about that our life is like a vapor. So those two verses kind of tie together and put us in a mindset of we have to make sure that we're prepared. We have to make sure that we are not in the place that the rich man was in. That we're not coasting through life. We're not done working for God. We're not done serving Him. We're not just sort of, I'm coasting to, I'm retired, so to speak. We have to make sure that we're prepared. We're always working to serve Him. So if you've made that first step and become a Christian, great. That's not where the work ends. That's one of the hardest lessons I think we all have to learn, right? Is once look at what all I've done. We're at the beginning. We are at the point of, at that point, to go and work, to go and teach, to go and serve others, to do things that would be pleasing to God. So if you're a Christian tonight and you have, obviously made that first step of obedience and speaking to our younger Christians and our newer Christians, that's not it. The work's not over. We've got to push on and continue to work, continue to serve, and teach others. If we're not living our lives in a manner pleasing to God, then we have no hope in our current state. We're like the rich man, right? Our lives can be required of us, and what reward do we have? We have no reward if we're in that state. So I would encourage everyone not to leave here tonight without thinking of two examples we have in the New Testament. In Acts 26 and 28, Paul was before Agrippa, and he is giving his defense, right? And he is trying to teach him some portion of the truth at least, and get him to change and to obey. And Agrippa's response is, "You almost persuade me to be a Christian." And also Felix in Acts 24, what does he say? He says, "Go away. I'll call on you when I have a convenient time. We'll work this out later. Right now I've got other things going on." And sadly, we have no record of King Agrippa or Felix ever responding to the gospel. We have no record of them ever obeying. They both had opportunity. They didn't seize that opportunity. And their lives are like vapors, right? Their lives are required of them at some point, potentially without the opportunity to obey again. So we don't want to have that legacy if we've not obeyed. So I ask tonight that if anybody has a need, we make use of this opportunity we have. We don't leave that legacy of Felix and Agrippa. Instead, we obey and start working towards God as we stand and sing.